Welcome back to another episode of Meet the Creatives. Today I am joined by Alex Schleifer, the VP of Design at Airbnb, which is an awesome title to have. Thank you for joining me on the podcast today, Alex. I appreciate you being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So founded in August of 2008, based in San Francisco, California, Airbnb is a trusted community marketplace for people to list, discover, and book unique accommodations around the world, online or from a mobile phone or tablet. It's pretty remarkable that it's just 2008 that this company started. That's like mind-blowing. Airbnb connects people to unique travel experiences at any point in more than 34,000 cities and 191 countries. It's probably more than that since I found that. But you came to Airbnb from Say Media, but then before that, you worked at Sideshow from 2000 to May 2011, and you were the CEO and co-founder there, working with clients like Mattel, Microsoft, Fox, among others. So let's start off with that. What was that like to kind of start your own agency, and what were some of the highlights, and what were some of the most difficult and challenging things about that?
So first off, I started. It started earlier than early 2000. It started around, I would say 97, even earlier. So around 17, 18, 19 years old, was really into making video games. I think that's why we started the company. We wanted to build a video game. We got a little hung up on the budgets that were needed to buy a 3D engine. It's hard to remember this today, but at the time, we didn't have Unity or Unreal Engine. It cost you $250,000 to start something like that. So we started making websites. The internet was just new. And so we really bootstrapped the operation for a long time. And it was, we ended up having clients on 4 continents. We were doing, at times 150, 200 projects a year.
Wow.
So incredibly, the velocity of work. And we were a small team. We kind of went between, we were between 10 and 30 people, depending on the size of the project. It was, everything was, and I know a lot of young designers starting out as freelancers or as small agencies know that is, you have to do everything. You have to do the marketing, the pitching, the payroll, making sure that, your software licenses, everything's a pain in the ass at that stage. So you learn all the different parts of it. But it taught me a lot of things, like working across, teams that are not in the same office. We had people all over the world. Clients that weren't in the same country we were in, and really taught me how to kind of go in and pitch to large companies and walk into those situations where you have to kind of get a company to trust you, even though you're incredibly young and could come across as a come across maybe as inexperienced when in fact you're not, and in fact you're gonna give them a tremendous amount of energy. So we did that. I ended up doing that for 15 years, I think, and until we sold the company. One of the great ways that we got some recognition and stuff that helped a lot was really doing personal projects. And at the time, it was a little bit easier to get recognition online. There wasn't as much stuff on there, but we launched UX Magazine, which was then nominated for Webby, which then kind of got us that exposure, and trying to do as many talks and meet as many people as possible. So that was an interesting time. It was 15 years of incredibly hard work.
Wow, that sounds like hard work.
Yeah,
that's so cool. So you came to Airbnb from Say Media to take on one of the most sought after jobs, currently right now. It's one of the hottest companies in the world right now. And it's a pretty difficult task. It sounds like from what I just heard that you were pretty cut out for it. But leading user experience, production, user research at Airbnb. And I read in that your Wired magazine article that your job isn't necessarily to design products, but design how Airbnb works. So, in your personal opinion, how should Airbnb work?
Well, just on joining Airbnb, an interesting fact is that I didn't know how big the role is going in. I think it might have, going in for those interviews might have scared the hell out of me if I had known like just just the scale of the role I was taking on. I mean, I knew it was big and I was excited about Airbnb. But even in the 2 years that I've joined, it's become so much more than it was when I was joining. So that's incredibly exciting. And you're never ready for that, right? You're never quite. So every day is a whirlwind, and every day I pinch myself. So I really, it's an incredible opportunity. The way I feel any organization should be designed really depends on what you're selling, what your values are, what your mission is. I think at Airbnb we have a very specific mission, which is building a world where anyone can belong anywhere, and that translates to things like really trying to develop travel that isn't commoditized, trying to build products that make people feel like they belong in a place that they're visiting, that they don't feel like an outsider, and generally making travel more fun and more transformational. And so when you're looking at that, it's incredibly important to me to make sure that we bring in all those different disciplines and make them equal partners within the decision-making process. And so even the way we define design is not just the traditional definition of the interaction designer or UX designer. It is really every discipline that we believe fundamentally impacts the user experience, the experience of our community on the platform. So we have researchers, we have content strategy, we have global translations, because we are inherently a global business. More than half the people on our platform don't use English as a primary language. And you can imagine that with travel, I think the majority of hosts and guests actually speak a different language to each other. So language has become incredibly important. And that is potentially unique to Airbnb. But I do believe that if you look, I do believe that design in itself is a spectrum that goes from, it includes illustrators, it includes UX designers, interaction designers, animators, researchers, content strategists, production designers, the people who build our tools. All of these people need to work together, and then within that organization also collaborate and have peers in engineering and product management. One of my hypotheses, one of my philosophies is that I don't want to build or run a designer-led organization. I want to build an organization where design thinking is at the forefront of everything we do, and everybody gets ownership of that. Because I think design thinking, even if you're an engineer, is something that is incredibly useful. And then I want design to be seen not as a service, and not as a leading discipline, but as a true partner. And for that to happen, it needs the entire organization needs to be down with that. I think some companies elevate design to a standing that is higher than other disciplines. Some companies use design as a service. I think the best way I've seen it working is really have kind of these peer groups work together. So each one of our teams has a lead engineer, a lead product manager, a lead designer, a lead researcher, all working together. And when that happens, I feel magical things can happen. So that's how I think of things. I'm of course a big fan of design. I think designers should be brought in as early as possible, but not necessarily earlier than anyone else. I think it depends on the project, and I think you need to be pretty malleable. And I also feel that sometimes we separate designers and engineers down very strict lines, and I think there's a spectrum there, right? And there's a lot of designers that bleed very heavily into kind of whose skill set kind of lean towards engineering. A lot of engineers who have really good UX mindsets. So if you look at this as a spectrum and you think of this as one team, it becomes much more useful. And I know it's working when I walk into a review and I don't know who the designer and who the engineer and who the researcher is. They're all just talking about the product and what we're building.
Right.
We're all like, craftspeople that are just working together to create something amazing. And that's, I think, is really, really powerful.
That is powerful. That's awesome. Like in that same article, as you can tell, I went through the depths of the internet to research for this.
Yeah, I can see that. Yes.
One of the quotes I really like from that is, there's a scramble to figure out what the culture of design is, but saying that a company has an engineering or a design culture just isn't productive because it comes down to personal opinion. There's so much talk about like where, design culture is headed and what design means and everything like that. About companies being design-led, and I feel like that word gets just kind of thrown around and doesn't really have like a defined meaning. Where do you think that design is heading?
I don't want to be overly prescriptive. I think there are companies that haven't embraced design in the way that, maybe Airbnb does, or even Facebook or Google today, that are incredibly successful. Right? And we need to come to terms with that. Would they be more successful with design tightly integrated into it? Possibly, right? I just don't have the metrics to back that up. But I do feel that where design is headed, and I think you need to look at it where product development is headed, is hopefully to a place where people have a clearer understanding of the different disciplines. So let me give you an example. I think design has a branding issue. I think, try this out, get into a lift or bump into somebody and they ask you like, what do you do? And you say, I'm a designer. And then you might say, I'm a product designer, I'm an experience designer, or a UX designer, or information designer, or whatever that is. Yeah. In 9 out of 10 times, they won't understand what that is. And you'll show them, well, this app, I designed that, and they'll sometimes say something like, oh, like an engineer. And you say, yeah, like an engineer. And I think that doesn't help because, that the lack of clarity and knowledge around what the discipline is also something that exists at an executive level in companies, and a lot of the people that make decisions around organizations, a lot of the people that found companies don't have that sense. They understand that they cannot launch anything without an engineer, but they don't really get a sense of, well, what does design land in that? Where does research land? What is content strategy? There's all these different disciplines, but, speaking about designers and UX designers specifically, we haven't done a particularly good job in clarifying what the role is. So my hope is that at some point it becomes as clear as, architecture, right? So that when you're building a building, you're going to have an architect that really kind of sets up the structure. You will have an interior designer that will create the beautiful spaces, and you will have engineers that build it. 9 out of 10 people know that. Yeah. 9 out of 10 understand that process. So if you tell anyone like, oh, I'm thinking about building a building, they have a basic sense of the structures. Yeah. And for us to have a design really truly integrated into companies at every level, we need to become much better at making that clear. And then also that clarity will help us bring, young people into the design field, because right now, I also call design an accidental profession. I think an interesting exercise that I always do with people that we're interviewing or hiring is like, how did you get into this? Mm-hmm. And the amount of times that people fell into it by luck is really impressive. Well, I like to draw and I like things. I thought I would be an architect, but then somebody asked me to make a website, and here I am, or I used to design things for my friends in Club Penguin. Like, these are real stories. But we can't. Nobody says like, I was really inspired by a beautiful piece of interaction that made me say I need to do this, because they can't connect what they're seeing. So we need to do a much better job. So we do a much better job at that once we start learning how to communicate, once people become more aware of it. Parents with kids in high school, all that type of stuff, I think will create more designers coming into the fray, and we'll also, have people in companies knowing where to put design and understanding what the discipline is about. But but it's up to all of us. Podcasts like this are important, but it's up to all of us to get there.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. I was one of 25 years young, and in the design world that means I'm like 11 years old. But in high school I actually took Photoshop classes, and it was kind of interesting how that manifested itself later on, because I kind of just in high school I just didn't care, and I had my teacher yelling at me, Mr. Karen, who was always yelling at me and telling me about applying myself and that this could turn into a career, and that I kind of had like a natural ability for it. And it's weird, I didn't believe him at the time. And then now I'm kind of seeing how just from that one discussion that has kind of turned out, now I'm working at at BuzzFeed in New York City and having this podcast. And it's really kind of great how just one little class in high school, it just kind of was like, oh yeah, I could do that. It's good to know you kind of have it in your back pocket. And then I had that same experience where it was like, somebody needed the menu, somebody needed this. And then the next thing you know, you're, talking to guys from Airbnb about, product design. So it's,
same as me. I was a kid who liked computers and loved hacking at video games. And I dropped out of high school. There's all these interesting paths to this, but I think we can't rely on those. Because imagine you never had that conversation. Imagine something else came up.
Yeah.
Right? Like, where would you be now?
Or if I never took that class, would that have been planted? Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, you and now you have a great job. I think being a designer is an incredible job. It's an incredible career. Yeah.
I think the worst day, and I'm at that stage in my career where you're kind of just bouncing through, and it's like you're just trying to keep up. And in New York, it's a pretty crazy place to work, but I think the worst day as a designer is like the best day at most jobs, and I pinch myself just being able to do that, so it's really kind of cool.
Yeah, it's also my generation remembers doing all this stuff for free because nobody would pay for it.
Yeah,
so it's also I think we've done a ton of progress, and I'm excited to see that, and I'm excited to see the new generation of designers coming up. Super exciting.
Yeah. Along that same note of young designers, this podcast has kind of turned into a place where young designers can get advice. But, for young designers that are looking to make it but yet don't have the experience, what would your advice be to be someone who wants to, whether it be like an engineer or a designer or anything, but people aren't willing to give them a chance, and then they just want to break in? How do you do that if you don't have the experience? And what would your advice be to somebody who is kind of up against, trying to break in and having a difficult time because of their lack of experience?
I think that, that experience is going to be different for everyone. But if I have to give some broad advice on that, I think that, first of all, it's incredibly important, both as an engineer and as a designer, to build up a portfolio. And it's not only so that you can show people, but it's to force you to build something real and make something tangible that has some real value, some real somebody can look at and it feels concrete. And for these things, just redesign something. For example, if you're a designer, grab like a tool that maybe is something that you feel could be done better, and redesign it, go through some user testing, put it in front of people, design it, create some mock-ups, save that, start building up a portfolio. And I think the reason I like this method is that you learn, B, you're faced with real challenges because it's not a flight of fancy, you're basing it on either a real product or an idea that you have. And C, it creates something that you can take with you, and that's important to show to potential employers or people you want to work with. But it's also important to show yourself that how you've progressed. And so, for me, it was hacking video games to change all the assets in it, and then kind of trying to figure out HTML and building a site that I had seen, or trying to build something. I redesigned Yahoo or something because that was the thing at the time. And that'll, that repetition will teach you a lot. I think understand that there are some basics to, for example, design that are pretty universal, and try to learn that. It's like a little bit like music. If you know music theory, it's not crazy difficult, but it will help you for the rest of your life, and it will totally change the way you solve problems. And I think design has similar things around, just like it's information design. So there are a lot of books based on information design, like studying the way we process calendars and dates and the New York subway map and all these types of things. Look at just the way great things are designed and try to understand them and read some of that theory. And then the thing that we don't talk about a lot is the tools. Being intimately comfortable with the tools and understanding everything from shortcuts to and just trying out things that you feel are inherently complicated. So something that you like, let's say you see on an app, and trying to rebuild that, whether it's a transition, an animation, a visual, a piece of code. Try to recreate something and understand the fundamentals of how it was created within the tool. And so these two basics will build that muscle. And then the third thing, so the first one is really kind of make stuff, understand the process, the basics and the tools. And the third one is like find mentors. Yeah. Just talk to people, ask them, and try to connect in a very real human way with someone that will give you advice, and that will also give you real harsh critique. Because the main thing that you're missing on right now is not the client or the business, but it's somebody to tell you when your work is miserable or when you've made a wrong decision. And design specifically, and coding, I think, is so much part of kind of that dialogue. I feel that those are three important things. Yeah. Two things to bear in mind. You should always take feedback, specifically negative feedback, thinking about the fact that somebody's giving you that feedback not because they think you can't do any better, but because they think you can do better. Right. And that's where they're coming from. And secondly, the ability to capture feedback and even sometimes argue and really defend your work if you feel like it's defensible is a huge part of being a designer. And like learning from that, learning from how to receive harsh critique, learning from how to kind of come away from that stronger is like one of the most useful skills. And, it's not easy, but at the end of the day, we can't take this type of feedback personally, because design, it's not like somebody is commenting on a piece of art that is meaningful to you. Even though a lot of the skills applied are very similar, design is a very technical skill, and you're often designing for large user groups, so you need that feedback, and you need to go in thinking, I do not know everything. Right. And that's a very useful skill, and it'll make you a better designer.
Yeah, for sure. So, you're talking about the diversity of people that you work with, and you guys have kind of broadened the definition of the product design job, including a variety of problem solvers, as you mentioned, translators, and it's all kind of under the design umbrella. But I've read that on your team, or I'm not sure if they're still there, but there's a former librarian, a mechanic, an insurance agent, a therapist, a modern dancer. Are they all still there for the most part?
Yeah, for the most part. We also have people who worked on rockets.
Wow.
So I can't use the word. It's not rocket science anymore because somebody actually knows rocket science. The diversity in skill sets on that team is tremendous. Found out just this week that one of our designers was into study glass blowing, right? And wow. I feel that there's this this tendency, you know, really fortunate at Airbnb to be able to work and attract some of the best people in the world, is that it's these interesting stories that actually make you an incredibly that make up an incredibly powerful design team. Because the different perspective, right? Perspective is nearly everything, and so being able to come in with such a different set of experiences just makes the product better. Like there's no question about it for me.
Yeah.
And I think if everyone just graduated from RISD and came over, even though some of the people graduated from RISD and they're amazing, I think keeping
I know what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. I think keeping a kind of a broad set of experiences is really important, and just super fun.
Yeah,
it's been it's been great.
Does it make for kind of a crazy like office? The people, does it get a little bit? Is it a little different than kind of the sort of a place where people just all like wear black and
Yeah, it definitely doesn't feel like that, and I definitely walked into design agencies. Sorry, this wasn't on mute. I've definitely walked into agencies where I felt like everybody comes from a similar space. It doesn't feel like that. And the incredible thing is like we have we have 160 or so people on the team, and you can literally ask like, oh, we're looking to do something like that, and somebody will come up and say, yeah, I know how to do stop motion, sure. Yeah. So it's fun, it's engaging. I keep finding new things out about the team, and the talent on display is just incredible.
So just in closing remarks, you've already given such great advice and for young designers and for the future of design, and this has been a lot of fun, and I appreciate you being here. So outside of talent and outside of natural ability and experience and all those things, when you're looking at a person's character, what are you looking for? What's the most important way to carry yourself?
And you can call it any way you want, whether it's empathy or just having high EQ or just having a sense of understanding a person's situation and managing to synthesize that. I think that's an incredibly useful skill. Design is not a discipline that you can design for personal reasons, right? But design is not. I think design is, and some of your personality will always come through, some of your taste will come through. But at the end of the day, design is a deeply technical skill that is meant to make things better for somebody else, and oftentimes millions of people. So I think that sense of ability to look at a problem empathetically and maybe exist in somebody else's shoes and kind of transport yourself in there, I think is incredibly, it's required, and I think it can be learned. It's not about being a nice person or outgoing or. I think it's more about really being able to step outside of your own head and try to solve things in a way that is a little bit broader, and also being acutely aware of what you don't know, right? So saying, okay, I know that I'm trying to solve this from a very internalized point of view. And a lot of times, the thing that's really difficult is that a lot of us designers start their careers in relative isolation. Right, sure. And you're not, and you're not exposed to a bunch of different folks, especially around the product that you're working. You might be talking to a client, and the client doesn't have that perspective either. And oftentimes you're not designing for them; you're designing for their clients, right? So that's something that we have various ways of measuring and interviewing for. But I think that empathetic skill of being able to absorb, synthesize somebody else's experience is really important. Also, don't be an asshole.
Yeah, for sure. Don't be a dick. That's awesome, man. Well, Alex, I really appreciate you being here. This has been a lot of fun. And I just want to, I'm at a point in my life now as a designer where I'm kind of at like the crossroads at like kind of really stepping up to the plate and having to kind of take an even deeper dive. And I think when I graduated from school, I thought that I was great. I thought that I knew everything, and I would just go and pentagram, and I'd like be on Michael Beirut's team, and like things would work out. And I've gotten to meet most of my mentors and heroes, and I've also been humbled at how much work it takes to get there. So having discussions like this with people like yourself really kind of help to keep the momentum going, keep it moving, and I just think it's great that people like yourself give up the time to help out people like me, and it's I'm really grateful that this design community is like that and is willing to give back, because there's not a lot of I don't think finance bros are really reaching out to their finance mentors and having podcasts, but they might be. Who knows?
It might be. And one of the reasons I was excited to do this is because, hopefully it reaches an audience. I'm really passionate about, the folks coming into the discipline now and the fact that we need more. And, I feel that at times, we mystify design because it makes us feel better that it's this, and we try to hide behind the fact that it's magic. And but I want to make sure that we work really hard, and I think you're doing that to demystify it and make sure that it's like approachable and be honest. And it's hard, and it's learning, and it's technical. It's not. It's it's all the things. It's a real job. And
for sure. Yeah. And that's kind of like been the what I've come to, because when I first started doing it, it was like I want to meet all my heroes, and this will be so much fun. And I was in school, so it was like design's nothing but fun. And now that I have this platform to use, I want to use it as a way to encourage other young designers and say like, yeah, listen, it's really hard out there for everyone, and everyone's gone through it, and everybody that I've talked to, no matter how successful, they've all had to pay their dues, and they've all been, thrown out of places and not made it, and you just got to stick with it. So.
Yeah, and they've all sat through a bad review, and they've all felt like an imposter, and they've all thought that they sucked at their job. So, So thanks a lot. And also I wanted to say, the one thing that I'm really proud of is the Airbnb.design blog. We try to make sure that any post that we put out there is actionable and is something that we can share and something that we may have learned. Do check that out.
Awesome, for sure.
Yeah.
Alex, thank you so much, man. You are the man. And if next time I'm in San Francisco, I will definitely, we're going to go out for a beer or two.
Yeah. Come and visit the office as well. It's a
Dude,
trip.
Hell yeah. I'm a sucker for nice offices. I love it.
Oh, you like ours.
Oh, yeah. All right, buddy. It's a pleasure meeting you, and hope to see you again soon.
See you later.
All right, take care.